all, and there we go. We got it. So this is the Lakeview Park feasibility study review with the Hitchcock Group, and today is October the 6th, and we welcome everybody and thank you for being here. And Charlie, I'll let you start it and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Judge. And greetings to everyone. I appreciate everybody taking the time out today to have our next park meeting to discuss our master plan with the Hitchcock Group and their affiliates, everybody that's participating. I know we've got a nice packet of information to go over today, and we're looking forward to hearing all the details and going into some discussion. And with that being said, I'm anxious to get started and anxious to hear the in-depth information coming from the packet. So I'll turn it over to the Hitchcock Group and we'll kick it off. One thing I would like to say in other business, after the presentation, I would like to bring Ann Northcutt on. She's got some information that may work well with this plan with some potential grant funding through economic development. So from there, we'll turn it over to the Hitchcock Group. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. I guess for the purposes of being live stream, my name's Randy Royer. I'm with Hitchcock Design Group. Today we have with us Shannon Creasy and Andy Howard, both from Hitchcock, Phil Parnan from Pros Consulting, and we've got Kenny McDaniel and Mark Thompson on here as well. And really the purpose of today's meeting is to talk to you about the core program, which is what we have been able to distill down from quite a bit of information that we've received from the community via surveys and stakeholder meetings and a number of comments received. So we'll walk through this. Phil's going to walk through the core program and give you a little background. And then if you want to do a deeper dive, there's a lot of data in that packet of information, and it's a lot of data. But we wanted to give you, the basic program here in this presentation, just to keep it relatively simple and understandable. So with that, Phil, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Now, Shannon, did you want to share the presentation and click through it, or would you like for me to?
You can if you have it pulled up.
All right. Let me pull that up here. I'm sorry, I apologize, but I'm not finding it, so I've got to go to the internet again and grab it real quick. I apologize. Just bear with me a second.
I got it if you don't still have it, Bill.
Yeah, go ahead. For some odd reason, my internet is going a little bit slower than it was earlier today. Thank you.
All right. Can everybody see it?
Yes, we can. All right, thank you very much. So as Randy said, my name is Philip Parnan with Pros Consulting, for those who are watching, and I wanted to go ahead and begin with where we started with public engagement. So if you could go to the next slide, we'll touch on the agenda first. for the presentation, and then we'll go ahead and get into the details. So we're going to go over the summary of public input today. We're going to go over the core program development, and that's the process that we use to develop the core program and also identify that core program. And then we'll talk about next steps. Next slide, please. So as I said, as a recap, we wanted to touch on the findings from the public input that we have collected so far. And the following results, we'll touch on those a little bit more detailed than the presentation that we had last time. So these are the most desired amenities that we processed to determine viability moving forward. In addition, these have been tested against the guiding principles, age groups, as well as costs for development and cost to operate and potential partnerships. In this, we'll also be looking to see what fits into the site as we move forward with design. Next slide, please. So the guiding principles evolved from the 3 data sets. That would be the stakeholders, the community input that we had received, and then finally the needs assessment survey that we had available online. The guiding principles are revenue generation, regional draw, and local needs. And what that means is we really want to try and achieve these 3 outcomes with the core program plan. Next slide, please. So as presented in the community engagement presentation a couple of months back, major actions in the center that were identified were new convention center, indoor-outdoor aquatics facility, walking trails, and improve the existing restrooms. When we look to the left, bottom left, for indoor amenities that were identified, those were indoor sports, walking and jogging track, indoor swimming pool, convention space, and multi-purpose pools. And then when we look at the outdoor amenities in the lower right, we see that improved sports fields, improved playground, and additional outdoor amenities, as well as improving other amenities within the that exist currently within the park were identified. Next slide, please. So this is the core program identified from the analysis of the public input that we just covered and the goals of the project. We're going to start with actual program plan, primary, secondary, and tertiary, and then we'll move into how we came to those conclusions. Next slide, please. So the core program, or primary core program, exists of field house and event center, including golf course improvements. We see this as potentially new sign, could include a digital marquee if zoning allows for it. This could also be utilized for promoting all kinds of activities and events by the county and partners within the facility. Others would include new T markers, hole signs, and possibly rebranding of the golf course. We also looked at overall improved circulation, which can include wayfinding signs and may include changes to vehicular circulation, along with bike and pedestrian circulation. And increase the size of the playground to accommodate local residents and visitors. Inclusive means a number of ground level elements for people of all abilities, elevated elements and ramps that would allow youth with disabilities or any assisted devices to change their perspective from the playground to a higher elevation. Next slide, please.
Now, Phil,
Yeah.
before we jump off that, well, and you may get into it, but you know, the field house and event and meeting space, you know, one of the items is flexibility, and
Correct.
that's what we heard over and over and over. Through,
And I do get to that in the next slide.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. So to Randy's point, the main goal for the core program is maximum flexibility. The more flexibility, the better. And so this facility accomplishes that with a number of activities that can be provided within these spaces. This includes the ability to hold small to medium-sized conventions, and the meeting rooms that we've identified in the secondary elements can also be utilized to take care of local needs, somewhat similar to those types of services you would see within a community center type facility. So we envision the field house to double as exhibit hall space, and with telescoping arena seating serve as a performance venue as well. This space can also be used to create championship courts within that arena seating environment. So as you see on the left, the primary elements consist of 8 basketball courts, and 4 of those basketball courts would be over that one championship court where the arena seating would telescope from. 16 volleyball courts, potential for 8 tennis courts, 24 pickleball courts, and 8 futsal or indoor soccer courts. That space, when cleared out of goals and seating, can also be utilized for gymnastics and cheer meets with additional pads, stage performances, as well as meeting recreational spaces as well, and an elevated or floor walking track, depending upon how the design ends up. When we look at the secondary elements, we're looking at concessions, merchandising, food prep, and kitchen, and that offers a lot of opportunities from vendors coming in to provide services where a portion of the revenue generated comes back to the county, as well as any events that are being held there to bring in outside catering, and potentially makerspace kitchen rentals for those who are prepping for things such as the farmer's market. In addition, obviously a lobby with informal gathering spaces, more intimate, 3 to 5 people, would be great at an entrance, place where there's enough space for individuals to collect. Let's utilize sports as an example. An entire team would gather at that space, get checked in, and then move on to where they're ready to play. Because there's a lot of wall space in the exhibit hall, which is referred to as the field house, there's also wall space on the exterior that would be adjacent to or an interior wall of the meeting space. A lot of those would normally sit vacant, but they're being utilized now for climbing wall experiences with automatic belays, so that it doesn't really require staffing, but that is definitely an opportunity that should be explored. When looking at the field house, it would be ideal to have indoor vendor plaza area where individuals with booth spaces could set up, such as youth sports organizations or affiliations that promote and hold larger athletic competitions. Obviously, there would need to be an administrative area. That administrative area could also double as a ticket booth for events, for ticketed events that could be held within the performance arena. Storage is definitely needed for that, and storage that has access from the outside, not just interior access, but both. Indoor playground also would add value to that for siblings that may not be attending the sports, or for parents who may be there locally utilizing it in a community center capacity for children to have some play as well. Obviously, we looked at the Lakeview Park Golf Course for the amenities and improvements that we just discussed, and improved inclusive outdoor playground. And obviously, we all know that that's going to require additional parking when we're talking about a space this large and the number of people that it can accommodate. Next slide, please. So when we look at the core program and the secondary, it is about improving the sports fields that exist, outdoor amphitheater, as well as increasing the size and play of splash pad, dog park improvements, and improvements to the pavilion. We've incorporated some inspirational pictures, as you can see here, as well too, that also give you an image understanding of what we would like to accomplish as far as these types of improvements. So when you look at the lower left of the amphitheater, having a stage, and it could also be a concrete pad with a mobile stage that is put on that as well too, And seating for up to 4,000 to 5,000 people would really create a great event space that could be utilized for the events as well as just the community and their local needs and events as well too. When we talk about the improved outdoor sports fields, the fields could include 50% synthetic turf. That would be our recommendation for the existing fields. There's also potential we see to work with the high school to upgrade those fields. And those fields could potentially become the outdoor championship fields for the tournaments, obviously still serving the local high school needs as far as those sports are concerned as well. Also, another property could help to increase the number of fields. And we also know that there's been talk with the city about partnering regionally for a greater regional draw and or potential national draw. To achieve this regional draw and increase potential for that national draw, partnering with those schools as well as the city and potentially Kentucky State University would be beneficial to explore. There are improvements that would need to be made to some of the overall flow within the city from site to site with wayfinding signs and things of that nature to make a greater experience for that national draw. And a few examples where we have could see the city and county working together on, obviously the wayfinding signs, improving field turf and drainage to ensure that weather delays are minimal and cancellations are not happening as frequently or at all. So when we look at the splash pad, we're looking at an increase to about 2,500 square feet with play elements that are themed. You can see that picture in the bottom, second from the left, demonstrating that with the orange dumping bucket. When we look at the dog park improvements, enhanced improvements that include social gathering spaces for humans, such as shelter, where there's seating for those folks to gather, as well as dog agility and water play, and if done correctly, can generate additional revenue from memberships, which will help to offset operational costs. Pavilion improvements, those could be done at the current location. They could also be incorporated into the ends of the field house with garage doors that open and create somewhat of an open air feel for that facility. This could also continue to allow operations should there be another impact from the pandemic and closures or restrictions on the number of people unless you do have that open air environment. So we're trying to take that into account as well moving forward in design. Next slide, please. So these are the elements that we had just spoken of. We're looking at pavilion capacity of roughly around 150 to 200 capacity. And currently, though, the pavilion has restrooms attached to that. And that's a really good design to keep incorporated when moving forward. So in addition, some secondary elements on the exterior for the park would also be an exterior vendor plaza, which would allow for food trucks as well as, excuse me, as well as any tents for those who are bringing merchandise for certain events or partners. Next slide, please. So the third element, or the tertiary program, we believe will require additional land. And the aquatic center could be incorporated into the overnight accommodations, as most hotels do have pools. At a minimum, an indoor pool. From some of the images you're seeing, there is an opportunity to go larger, creating another destination element within the hotel and aquatic center. Working with hotels and partnering to expand the pool to an aquatic center could help to accomplish this desired amenity, but not necessarily do so at the expense of the county. With hotels, it's important to remember that you're close to a major metropolitan area, and Lexington is so close that there is a greater possibility that people will stay in Lexington, which means they will play in Lexington. This could impact the ability of the county to capture the full potential of revenue or full potential of the economic impact from multi-day events. And we'll talk about the hotel capacity here in a few slides. Additional outdoor sports fields could also be included on the new property, further expanding this program, as well as the economic impact to the county, city, and state. The recommendation of the additional outdoor sports fields would be to focus on additional multi-use rectangular fields. The intent is similar to the field house, and that is to create maximum flexibility with the outdoor sports fields. Excuse me, traditional and non-traditional sports can be played on those rectangular fields, such as football, soccer, lacrosse, rugby, and field hockey. Not to mention that the adult-sized fields can accommodate multiple youth fields when talking about rectangular fields. It is also possible to do that with temporary fencing of baseball diamonds, but there are some who travel and spend a significant amount of money to travel that feel that that is actually lessening the experience for guests. But we do know that there are still venues that are doing that, new venues being developed doing that. So when we talk about those fields, youth fields being able to fit within inside adult fields, an example of this would be for soccer. So an adult soccer field, one field can support a set of teams for one tournament. Well, when you take that and you lower the age group to ages U11 and U12, you can fit 12 soccer fields within that one adult soccer field. And when you decrease the age to U9 and U10 fields, you can fit 18 of those within that. So take those teams that are playing on that one field, and now you've grown it from one field to 12 fields or to 18. Increasing the number of teams like that can fill a tournament much better. It can also increase hotel nights revenues for the county, as well as the overall economic impact for the county as well. Next slide, please. So the core program was developed using a matrix to determine how well these amenities achieve the outcomes that we had identified earlier in the presentation. Next slide. So when we look at the supported amenities applied to outcomes, we wanted to create a color code with that. And so we looked at ranking them from our experience and current industry potential to achieve the outcomes. We looked at what age segments could be served. We looked at the guiding outcomes, those principles that we discussed earlier, the cost to develop, the cost to operate, as well as the partnership potential. And then we identified the potential, whether it was low, medium, or high, as you see on the right, and identifying the cost to develop and operate and that partnership potential with those same measures as well. Next slide, please. Ideally, what we would like to have seen is serving the most age segments, if not all, as you can see in this graph below the text. We wanted to see something that has a high potential for revenue generation, high potential for regional draw, and highly addresses the local need within the community. If we were to look at operational costs, we wanted to see medium to low. Looking at cost to develop, we'd like to see medium to low as well too. We know, especially right now, that's not necessarily the case when it comes to development because of inflation and the increase in cost of products, as well as the supply chain interruptions that have been an issue during the last 18 months as well. And we anticipate that those are going to continue for a while and should be accounted for as part of this. And then when we look at partnerships, we wanted to see a high partnership potential. And it doesn't mean that we're going to discount anything that has a high cost to operate and a high cost to develop. We would also like to see that with a very high cost of revenue generation and a high cost of regional draw in order to offset some of those costs. But we would also not, shy away from that. And you'll see from some of the tables, or I'm sorry, the matrices that we've created, that there are exactly that. We have not found one that fits perfectly what we would like to see. Next slide, please. So when we looked at the important outdoor amenities, this is one example of the matrices we developed to determine the highest and best use to achieve the outcomes identified. We have used green arrows on the left to identify the highest and best use. You'll see in the column right next to it a number. 3 is next to the first green arrow. Those are the citizen survey rankings. Obviously, we have a column for amenities. We address the youth, or I'm sorry, the age segments served, as in youth, adult, and seniors. And then we go into the goals and the cost to operate and potential partnership. So when we look at the green, identifying the highest and best use, convention space, indoor event, indoor basketball, volleyball, tennis, and pickleball, as well as performing arts auditorium and exhibit space, all rose to the top for highest and best use based on the rankings of low, medium, and high for guiding outcomes, costs to operate and develop, as well as partnerships. It doesn't mean that they meet all of the age groups, but collectively, all of the primary as well as secondary core programs do serve all age groups. And that was ultimately the goal, to make sure that there was something for everyone. We also use the blue arrows for determining the medium best use, but saw opportunities to incorporate several of these into the core and secondary programs, including the indoor walking and jogging track, and the meeting rooms and multi-purpose rooms. And then when we got to the yellow arrows, we use this for the lowest use, but there could still be a place within the county parks, as people have identified additional county parks as being a desired element moving forward. Next slide, please. When we looked at the most supported major actions, we used the same color code, and we identified improve existing parks, improve existing restrooms, improve existing playground, as well as develop new parks, enhance, enlarge the splash pad, and develop new synthetic fields as the core primary. We identified developing a new indoor-outdoor aquatic as a secondary element if size availability within the park exists, improve existing picnic shelters and pavilions as well. Excuse me, I'm sorry, those are the tertiary. In blue were the improve the parks, as well as improve all of the existing. And the primary was develop the new convention center, improve the existing athletic fields, and develop spaces for performing arts. Next slide, please. When we looked at important programming, again, in green, youth sports, community special events and festivals, indoor sports, all rose to the top along with indoor special events. Secondarily, we identified after school and out of school camps as a program opportunity, as well as adult sports, performing arts, conventions for economic impact, rentals of spaces within the facility, as well as outdoor facilities within the park, fitness and wellness programs, and programs for people with special needs as the primary core programming that would, or I'm sorry, yeah, indoor special events as the primary core for that. And the secondary core was for people with special needs and the rentals. Now, thirdly, we identified with the yellow that additional land could help identify these facilities and amenities that would be able to fit within additional land. And that is water fitness programs, swim lessons, art classes, and recreation and competitive swim. Next slide, please. So we also looked at hotel accommodations, and from our search, we're able to find all of the hotels identified here for surrounding areas. We identified the distance away, as well as the room inventory. In addition, there are most likely more hotel rooms that would be needed. This will be known once the operational strategies are completed as a part of the overall plan, and we identify how many people we need to have accommodations for the size of tournaments. And we've also included the closest campgrounds as well. However, approximately 3 to 5% of participants will actually utilize overnight camping accommodations. So while there are 300, there is a much smaller demand for these, as additional work is necessary when going to these tournaments to set up your camper, as well as to tear down and anything that may pop up And I am speaking from personal as well as professional experience. We have traveled to multiple tournaments with our children, utilizing the camper as well until the last few years, and did not really utilize it but once. So we found it to be much easier to stay within the hotels that were within close proximity. It is also important to know that with those hotels, there is an opportunity to partner on that. And there is a gap of 1.4 miles between Lakeview Park and the closest hotel, University Lodge, on the table. And so there's a great opportunity. We'll tell you that from our experience, hotels are going to best serve the guests, and especially for these events, if it were on site, meaning if there was enough room within the park to also incorporate that. Second best or next best alternatives would be an adjacent property to the park, or as I identified, somewhere within that 1.4 mile gap that exists between the closest hotel and the park currently. Next slide, please. When we looked at the similar provider, we identified gaps in sizing for indoor spaces. Currently at 160,000 square feet, within the 3-hour drive time, there is not but one space that accommodates that in the form of a field house. The field house size that we recommended is at least, I think, 46-7% of that 160,000 square feet. So roughly 75,000 square feet at a minimum, which puts you higher than the average size and definitely higher than the majority of those. When we looked at the convention center space, it's a doozy. When you look at the highest being 1,200,000 square feet, that is a lot of space. Those are the largest conventions and conferences for that type of a space. But there is success for those providing it for even smaller size conferences. And we found the smallest to be 18,000 square feet. Average roughly around 288,000 for that. But know that the convention center square footage also includes the exhibit space, where within the field house, most of those do not include the meeting and conference rooms that we are recommending. Next slide, please. It was also important for us to look at technology, especially considering the evolution of conferences, going from in-person to all virtual, and then this year having more of a hybrid approach for several of the conferences that we've been a part of as well. And so looking at the technology needed, the following technology will help support the uses and also has the ability to generate additional revenue with room rentals. It's important nowadays, as I've found out from working from home, to have the highest bandwidth possible for as many people as you would have in the facility, so that it doesn't slow it down and become a unenjoyable experience that is communicated via social media. It's also important to consider printers, but not just printers these days, but 3D printers are also becoming more popular as part of conference services from convention centers. It's also important to have a boost for your cellular signal within inside the building, a smart building system to help with some automated operations to help free up some of the maintenance time, keep overhead low by not necessarily needing as many staff. Also, virtual reality is becoming an important component to this, and having those capabilities within a conference center is also important. Telepresence capability, we know what travel has become like recently, and your plans may not always get you where you need to be in time. So having the ability for telepresence for those types of instances, and or for just general businesses that would like to have board retreats or staff retreats at that location, could be beneficial to bring in motivational guest speakers that may be less expensive if they do not have to travel to your location. Cybersecurity, now more than ever. I need not say more. We've always seen it. We've all, unfortunately, probably experienced it by now, and that's extremely necessary component. the convertible seating for arena seating, but also convertible with inside each of the meeting rooms and those spaces to have banquet style seating, but also to have educational style seating for laptops. More and more these days, individuals are bringing laptops to capture notes and have interactions with the individuals that are also at the conference. Digital boards within the conference center that highlight upcoming events, locations, any changes in schedule, things of that nature, as well as event center room fobs or keys that can be coded for one time or one day or a certain time frame use. This way, it doesn't allow or does not require a staff person to be there to get people into. When they check in, they can receive that and have access to the room. There's also hologram powered meeting rooms now as well that make a very entertaining experience in addition to just the educational component that people are there to receive. And then sporting event live streaming. We have seen more and more these days live streaming for youth sport events, especially in the wake of the pandemic, but also hectic schedules with family members. We too have participated in that. Unfortunately, my family, 2 boys and wife, did come down with COVID, but because they had it and built up the antibodies, they were going to the tournaments. However, I was not able to attend, still not have contracted it or have the antibodies. So I was able to watch from home. I will tell you that that cost me anywhere from $10 for a tournament to $50 for a tournament to participate virtually and watch those games. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to identify a few similar facilities. And what we identified were 4-H Hendricks County Fairgrounds. The 4-H Fairgrounds has an event center within it. They have also improved their pavilions to include the garage doors that I was speaking of to create more of an open air event. And those are great for the livestock sales, the competitions that they have in place. And they also utilize those locally for other programs and organizations that partner with the 4-H Fair. The Lawrenceburg Event Center is also another one that we had found. They have the ability to have performances as well as meeting space and indoor events that fit within their square footage. And then next slide, please. And one that we had found in North Carolina, Rocky Mount Event Center, is the one that's more similar to what we're proposing than anything else. It has the arena seating and the ability to create the competition field, as well as to utilize that entire event space for conventions and or for multiple sporting courts. Excuse me. They also utilize it for banquets, either with conferences or as wedding rentals. Next slide, please. In conclusion, the highest and best use for the project is field house concept. That field house concept has maximum flexibility, can include small to medium-sized conventions, address the local need as well for those spaces during non-convention or event time to be utilized for local recreation. The field house could also serve that local community, and those multi-purpose spaces, utilizing partners to provide programming in there and or utilizing your own staff to provide programming in there makes that a very capable space and appropriate for those uses. We took a look at the convention industry, and there were a few that thought maybe the convention industry was not going to be the same as it was the same as it was pre-pandemic when we come out of the pandemic. However, with a lot of the adaptations that the convention centers have done and the capital investment to enlarge convention centers still happening across the country, we believe that there will be a return to previous numbers with some of those technology enhancements. I can tell you during the pandemic, individuals were identifying that host tournaments were identifying that they were not able to hold those tournaments or have their convention at a certain venue in a certain state because of restrictions, they were able to shop around, identify a new location to be able to move those tournaments. We had 3 out of 6 tournaments moved in the winter months while we were dealing with the pandemic. So we know, because there's still families seeking that type of an experience for their kids and their family as a whole, that there will still be a need moving forward within that industry. We also believe that improving and upgrading the rest of the park will be necessary to have that big and best first impression as people are driving by and may not have children any longer, but recognize that there are events going on there and can participate, but also to achieve the outcomes that were identified. And in order to do that, when you're talking about the outdoor fields that exist currently, improving those and redeveloping 50% of those to be full turf would be extremely beneficial moving forward as well. We also know that partnerships, especially those where there's a high potential for partnerships in the identified primary core program, can decrease the high cost of operation and also development if that's a capital partnership. We think that it's important to at least have the discussion with the high school to incorporate those fields and improve those to be the championship fields, not just for the local youth, but for the youth that would be participating in the tournaments that would be held in Lakeview Park. Next slide.
All right, well, we took a look at some land use studies, but before we dive into that, I know that was a ton of information. Does anybody have any questions? I know you guys got a chance to kind of look at that beforehand, but before we kind of dig into some other things, didn't know if anybody had any questions. If not, we'll
Squire Tracy's got a question.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Judge. Phil, one quick question. In a convention center like this, how many different events or meetings per se could you see going on at the same time?
That's a good question. I would say that it's really going to depend upon the size. You do have, depending upon size, the ability to hold more than one event within the facility. So there could be one event going on within the field house, while there is another event going on within the educational conference center meeting room area as well. So I know for sure, as long as it's not exceeding, the overall capacity typically identified by the fire marshal, then I think you would be good to hold 2 events. It is also possible for smaller events and smaller conventions to hold 2 to 3 of those, utilizing the entire facility and people having the ability to benefit from not just what is there with their conference, but other conferences as well. A lot of conferences, when they're in a large enough space where they're not the only one there simultaneously, are starting to identify, hey, we have people coming over to our conference from the other one to check and see what our socials are. Maybe we should provide an opportunity for them to attend our socials as well too, and broaden their network. And so they're starting to capitalize on that, and we feel that this facility could do that too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Phil, are you saying that you're, based on what we have here, that there would be 2 separate buildings, one a field house building and another a convention center?
No, Judge, I apologize. Let me clarify that. So thank you for that question. We're talking one building. They're just 2 different uses and they're adjoined. So they're adjacent to each other. Now, with your entryway, there's another opportunity to create a catwalk over it and truly have, 2 separate sides of the road, to have one on one and one on the other. And we do know of convention spaces as well as recreation centers that do that. But we feel like one building and is going to help decrease the amount of overhead necessary to operate it if they were 2 separate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
Mm-hmm. I don't see Squire Muller. Does he have a question?
Not right now, Judge. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's hard work on this. I'm going to hold my questions till the end. So I got a feeling Shannon might answer some of them on this next section. So I'm going to hang tight. Thank you.
All right, well, okay, so these next few slides are preliminary studies of land use plans. We've taken the program elements that Phil has mentioned and looked at how these spaces would fit within the park's existing usable space. It's important to understand the amount of space needed to incorporate these amenities, not just the square footages, but also parking and circulation to get throughout the park. I want to reiterate that these are not proposed concepts for the future of the park. These are really just land use studies to really help us understand what can all fit within this site. Our next steps will kind of include taking these studies and putting them more into concepts. So again, these are not the solutions, but we're still working towards there. This first slide you guys are going to recognize. You've seen it before. We've taken the existing boundary here in red as well as the sinkhole limits and kind of put those on top of some other comparable sites that we've heard mentioned before, just to kind of give you guys some examples of square footage that's necessary. So this first comparison here is the Falling Springs in Versailles. You can see that the project fits well really within the boundaries of the park. However, the amenities that are at this Falling Springs don't really meet all guiding principles of Lakeview Park. But again, we wanted to kind of show that. This second comparison is a field house and water park in Indianapolis, Indiana, called the Monon Center. There's quite a lot of support in the Aquatic Center for Lakeview Park. Phil kind of mentioned that as a tertiary example, but we really wanted to kind of show you what that could mean. As you can kind of see with the field house and the event space and this Aquatic Center, it would really change the entire use of the site there. You kind of lose a lot of the existing identity of Lakeview Park in order to accommodate the needs necessary for the water park. Then the bottom two examples are Grand Park and then the Elizabethtown Sports Complex. Again, I know some of you are familiar with these, some of you may not be, but there are some existing fields within Lakeview Park and obviously a strong history of recreation within the parks, which is why we wanted to kind of show this as an example. But really, in order to provide the something comparative that's allowed at Grandview Park and Sports Complex, you'd really have to, again, lose the identity of Lakeview and the fact that you'd have to lose quite a bit of the amenities that are already existing on site. So again, these are just some comparisons that we've heard in the past people mention, and so we wanted to kind of show you just square footage wise what would be necessary and what could fit within the site. Just a reminder, I'm showing the limits of the sinkhole just because, again, things could be buildable there, but it's just going to increase cost and everything there. All right, so these we do not need to get into a whole bunch of detail with just because they're preliminary studies, but we wanted to show you some examples of the way we're exploring the land use. This first example here expands the skate park, playground, and splash pad into kind of a central hub here while enhancing the recreational fields, but keeping really them in the same place for the most part. The biggest changes really happen along the current access into the park, where we would put the field house and the accommodating parking within there. So we've kind of incorporated the field house in this example to really look out onto the golf course and the driving range. The club pro building would kind of be incorporated into this field house so that it kind of be all one operational building. And we've also, in this example, tried to kind of explore looking at an access, whether it's vehicular or pedestrian, to the neighborhoods to the northwest or northeast. So again, sorry, these are rotated. North is to the right. And your second option, or the study B, the field house is broken into actually two buildings, like you mentioned, Judge. The field house being here in a similar location, and then kind of a catwalk or walkway then to where we would have more of the convention and events building. Again, this is just another option to separate it, kind of just trying to looking at best use possible. And the other thing that we looked at here is reducing the amount of multi-use fields. You'd still have enough to really have, I think about, these are 2 of the larger fields, so it'd be 3 if you turn the game sideways, but then adding 3 additional sports or softball fields that could then be able to host full tournaments if you include that high school field. It's kind of like your championship game. So you'd have 8 sports or softball fields then if you could do, you know, partner with the high school. The other thing, this kind of moves around some things. It really moves the pickleball and it moves your skate park, kind of exploring to see what we could do more in this like the underutilized space down here. But again, there would be opportunities. We've expanded the motorsports arena in both of these examples and really tried to increase parking so that the fairgrounds could really fit within any of these areas. So again, flexibility is really what we're looking at when we look at all of these, but just kind of want to give you a couple of examples of what we've been exploring. Any questions on those before we kind of dive into next steps?
Hey, Shannon, this is Michael. Thank you for all that. It's good to see different options. If I could maybe switch to Phil, because you brought up something on that last slide. You had talked about adding more softball fields for more regional push, and I think dropping one of the multi-use, say soccer fields, I'll call it. Phil, what do you see from a regional standpoint as far as pulling people into town? What's needed more per se? Currently we have 4 softball fields that I'm sure we can improve on, fix lighting, things like that. Do you think the multi-use fields would be more beneficial for our community or more softball fields?
Sorry about that. Let me unmute first. Good question. So you would benefit from adding either, because those are additional ball diamonds or fields compared to what currently exists. However, once again, if we're looking at maximizing each field, then really the rectangular sports fields have the greatest potential to generate the largest tournaments as well as the greatest economic impact from more teams, especially with the lower age groups. If you're looking at strictly in the high school or older age groups for soccer through high school, you're going to have one field, whether it be rectangular or whether it be a ball diamond, regardless. And so if the intent is to bring in more youth and families, then we'd have to suggest the rectangular fields to be a greater revenue generator and greater regional draw. Soccer is truly the world's most popular sport. They do bring a lot of individuals. However, I also know that there's still a lot of popularity within baseball and softball. It just makes it a little bit of a challenge because one field is still one field, no matter what the age group for baseball and softball.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Phil.
Phil, or Shannon, in the design, I did not see tennis courts added in there. I just saw fields. And earlier it had said that on the outdoor facilities, that tennis courts was one of the top concepts that the committee is looking at. So why are they not, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, from a operational standpoint and a revenue generation standpoint, tennis has the fewest amount of players per team, up to doubles. And so you're looking at 2 to 4 people at a time playing on each court. So just by that alone doesn't compare with revenue generation and or really maximizing the flexibility of the space. You would have tennis and you would have pickleball, and that would be it. We really think that the greater benefit for tennis moving forward is the indoor ability with the field house. because then you have year-round capabilities, not just summertime capabilities.
And not outdoor, and no outdoor facilities.
Correct, not at this time. Now, that is definitely something that could still be explored with additional property, because from what Shannon was demonstrating, it's a pretty tight space. The way the property outline is also doesn't lend itself to being clean and easy in incorporating all of those. So I think that there's always an opportunity, especially with the community asking for more parks within the county park system. I still think there's an opportunity moving forward. Shannon, was there anything that you wanted to elaborate on as well too?
No, I'm just, again, that was my assumption as well, Bill, that tennis is going to be incorporated into the field house, which is why we weren't showing outdoor fields.
One thing to consider, or just to remember, is these two concepts that we've thrown out there are basically showing you, here's how much room these things that we've talked about take up, how much space. And as we started hearing the wants and the needs of the community, and Phil started looking at the highest and best use, one of the things as we do start to put the site plans together is, I heard in a number of the stakeholder meetings and conversations with people that I think they love the look of the park. I think they'd like to see more of the historic feel of the park. And if we just, we've got 10 pounds that we're trying to cram into a 5-pound bag. And what we want to be very careful. And I think it's really something for you all to consider as you see this core program, is how do you balance that economic development with really the beauty of the park, and still making it a place that the surrounding neighborhood, the folks that like to come out here and walk, are really going to enjoy it, and that it's just not crammed, packed full with everything under the sun. Because there was a big wish list. I think the community was, they really let us know that there are a lot of things that they sure would like to see. And I think we feel like it's incumbent upon us to try to meet that balance, but still meet your goals as well.
Was there any thought, Randy or Philip, because there was a lot of talk and a lot of sentiment about, yes, a convention center is needed, but it needs to be downtown. And so not putting a convention center on this property.
As we talked about this and we started looking at how do we, as we start ranking and prioritizing, I think the fact that we heard over and over, we need a flexible space. I mean, the thing that jumped out at me, and this is just an Indiana kid who grew up in a community where we had our graduations in our high school gym. And I heard people say, hey, we don't have any place to have high school graduations. And, I heard numerous people talk about, we want flexibility. We want to be able to have indoor sports, but then it sure would be nice to have some other types of events. This type of facility lends itself to a convention if you wanted to have a convention here, but that wouldn't necessarily be its focus or its sole purpose. It would just accommodate it should you want to do that.
If I may add to that, the size of this facility is not so large that a convention center downtown could, it really could survive as well too, and thrive in that environment, because the downtown area lends itself to have the capabilities to be much larger, multi-leveled as well within the previous space. And there may be additional spaces that could be explored. But we believe that even if this facility were to hold a small convention, that it wouldn't deter anyone from utilizing a larger convention space, should that be looked at in the future to be put in the downtown area. they would be able to coexist.
Okay, you've got next steps and schedule.
All right, well, so again, this is a lot of information, so we will go ahead and follow up. And Charlie, I'll send you this presentation as well as the program report that has even a deeper dive of Phil's matrices that he kind of gave you the general overview of. So again, you can kind of dive into that. And really our next steps would be getting approval from the committee about this program. So there's a couple different options that we could kind of do that moving forward. We ideally, just to keep this moving, would like to hear back within a week. So you can kind of just let us know it's approved as is, or you can kind of say approved with, you know, change here or here, or we can set up a whole nother discussion after you guys kind of get a chance to discuss amongst yourselves. Because again, we know this is a lot of information and we want to make sure we get it right. But after we get approval from you, assuming hopefully in the next week or so, we will dive into the concept site design, which includes an overall cost estimate. Phil will take the program and jump into the standards, strategies, and pro forma to really kind of finalize all that. And then we'll kind of incorporate all of that into economic impact analysis, as well as just the implementation strategy. So that's a lot of stuff to fit in within the next 5 weeks or so, but we'd really like to wrap this up for you guys. So again, ideally, if we can hear back from you guys, we'll provide a preliminary park master plan November 5th that week. I can work with Charlie on finalizing a time, and then turning around that in 2 weeks to really provide the final master plan on November 15th or 16th.
Who would be part of the preliminary on November the 5th? I don't like the idea of doing that to the public on a Friday. And plus we have a conference that we won't be through until noon on Friday.
Okay, so yeah, we again, just to continue to move this along, we'd like to do another virtual presentation on the 5th or somewhere around there. And then the final park master plan can be to the community and you guys as well. That'll be in person if we want to do that.
What would be your preference, Judge?
Probably that next week, early that we could do it even on that Monday, the 6th, probably. So I guess one of the questions I have is does the community input have any bearing on the changes or the thoughts or the plan itself? Or are we just saying to the community, this is the plan, this is what we decided to do, and so here it is? So you understand my question. If we show this to the community and they say, all right, we don't like this, and there's a overwhelming outcry that we want this and we don't see this, what do we do?
Well, we can change it, but the process that we had proposed was to get as much public input, which we got an extremely large amount of it on the front end, so we had a good idea of what people were interested in. And then we also had to marry that with realistically what's missing in the region, because one of your goals is economic development. And so, you know, the thought is, if we need to get this pulled together so then we can share it out to the community. And I think what might make some sense is we share this preliminary master plan, and we can, you know, we don't have to do this on the 15th or the 16th. I just know that there's been some concern that the schedule has pushed out for a variety of reasons, and we just wanted to be respectful of your desire to finish it. If we need to spread this out, we can. If we present, you know, this preliminary plan on the 5th and provide, you know, say how you decide how much time you would like to be able to listen to the community and hear what they have to say. I'm sure the newspaper would pick it up and it could go on the website. And then, once we get some feedback, if there are some major changes or if there's, hey, we really like what we're seeing and let's move forward, then we can take that and wrap it up. But we'll just need a little bit of time, to do that. So, I think bottom line is we could probably have it done by the end of the year, but, we just want to make sure that we're getting you what you want when you want it.
Yeah, I understand that you don't want to go much further than the 15th or 16th. You don't want to get into Thanksgiving and then you turn around and 3 weeks later you got Christmas. We would really like to see it finished up before Thanksgiving for sure.
It gets a little hectic towards the end of the year as far as trying to get people's schedules to jive.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Hey, Randy, this is Michael. This is for either you or Shannon. First, I want to thank you all for all your hard work, and I like seeing options and hearing options. And I think circling back 1,200, surveys from the community was pretty strong, and I think you all have hit on all the good areas. So my question is, what are you all actually looking for specifically, from the park committee to this next phase? I'm assuming we would say, hey, we want 3 multi-use fields, just improve the softball fields. Let's do 1 building instead of 2. Is that the kind of things you're needing from us next? I'm just wanting to understand exactly what our homework is here.
Yes. If there's anything that you see, because the committee is, you're part of the community. And so now that we've been able to, we'd like your reaction. We want to make sure that we're, as we've gathered this information, we've put the program together, we've got the backup, which you have, to show you, here's how we landed on this, based on what we've heard from you. I don't know what conversations are happening behind the scenes with the Parks Department, and here I don't know, what's going on with downtown planning. Judge, I think you brought up this idea of the convention center downtown. If that's something that's coming back, I still think for Phil's comment, they both can coexist. That's not necessarily an issue, but we just like your feedback on what you've seen, and let us know if there is anything that you feel like we might have missed. And I think, Judge, you've mentioned tennis. If you feel strongly that, hey, tennis needs to show up here somewhere, based on what you're hearing, we just need to know that and see if we can figure out some place to do it. But as you can see, based on our initial concepts, you can start to see how much space these things take. And if tennis needs to show up, if you feel strongly about that, then we're probably going to have to remove something else. It's a little bit of a give and take, but until we really get into the nitty gritty moving things around, it's still pretty loose at this point. So
let me ask you this, Randy. One of the areas I did see, and I know that there's a lot of sentiment for, and that is down in your plan showed the amphitheater in the horse track arena, and that's good. I think that's a great concept. But couldn't instead of, or in addition to, in some ways, instead of it just being an amphitheater, but it could be an amphitheater plus a meeting space plus a dressing room, a larger building to accommodate outdoor concerts on the horse arena, kind of helping with the space concept.
We've thought about that. We've had some discussions internally, and my thought right now, until we really get into the nitty gritty designing of it, is that where the horse track area would be more small venue, small concert opportunity, and that if you wanted to have larger concerts, the more of a regional or more of a national band that just happens to be coming through here, but you need to be able to accommodate larger crowds. If the building, Shannon, can you go down to, or whoever's in control, go down to one of those concepts? So, if we arrange the building in this way, there may be an opportunity to create, an out on the back of the building, you could do a large platform patio area that bands could set up to elevated, and then use the driving range for people. As far as people to sit out there and watch the show. So you do that, and all of a sudden you've got 2 to 3 times more space to accommodate a larger show.
But you don't have any, you'd have to put, there'd be a lot of issues there. You'd have to have electric, you'd have to have water, you'd have to have all the utilities right there as a part of the design. And you just wouldn't be able to bring a band in. There's a lot of.
Well, the band would have to come in through the field house. They'd come in through the building because they'd be performing on the back patio of the building out to the crowd across that would be sitting in the lawn area, the driving range area.
Okay.
And
That's
that,
the idea.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts of then? You've got an amphitheater in there. So you're thinking that's more of a larger venue? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts again about the amphitheater?
well, I'm thinking that in this particular layout, the way we've got things located, it would give you some options. If you were having, if you needed a smaller venue, a local band or a local show, you could do it in the horse track. If you wanted to have a large concert, if there was going to be an orchestra, if you were going to have a traveling, rock band or some kind of a festival, music festival, you could do it and behind the field house across and have people sitting in the driving range area. So people would be able to park, they come out with their lawn chairs or whatnot and be able to sit out in that lawn area. And you'd be able to accommodate a lot more people than you could accommodate within the horse track small amphitheater. But it gives you options.
Okay. Food for thought.
Yeah, it's all at this point, it's just ideas based on what we've heard and things that we think might be of interest to the community.
I'd like, before we move on, I'd like for Ann Northcutt, Charlie Lewis, and Robert Hewitt, see if they have any questions.
Hey, Judge, if you don't mind, I've had my hand up for a while.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
Go ahead, Squire.
Randy, Shannon, Phil, and team, thank all of you for your hard work. I know you all really dug into this. I think it's also very important to thank the community. They've spoken, and they definitely have been heard loud and clear in regards to the community's needs and wants. And Phil, also thank you for digging in regards to the regional aspect of it and what your thoughts are on what we can do to draw regional events to our community to help, not only with hotels and economic development and restaurants, but just help the community as a whole. So thank you all for your hard work.
So you didn't have a question, Squire?
Nope, just wanted to thank them. Thank the community for showing up and getting their voice heard.
Ann?
I don't have any questions on the presentation, so I'll just hold back until you're ready for me to talk about a grant possibility.
Okay, all right. Charlie Lewis?
I guess the only question I have at this point, I know in our stakeholder groups, we had the YMCA involved, and I don't know what their process or how they're coming along and the parcel downtown stuff. parcel B and C or D and E and F or whatever it is. I just wondered if anybody knew where they stood, because, if they do something downtown as well, we kind of want to, that might be somebody we can kind of work with as far as, hey, what are you putting here and what do we put? I know we want to take care of Lakeview Park first. Please understand, I get that. But if we're building indoor tennis courts, they wouldn't want to build indoor tennis courts, I guess is what I'm saying. So I just wondered if anybody knew where they stood at this point, at this date and time.
Well, we'd also want to know how many volleyball courts they're going to make, basketball courts, whatever else they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Swimming pools and anything like that.
Charlie, I think the big thing though about this project at the park is that inside there's nothing per se going to be permanent the way it sounds. It sounds like, one day you can roll out and there's going to be basketball available, or that can be turned into volleyball or so forth, so there's not, I don't think it's not going to be a permanent thing. As far as, I don't want to speak for anyone in regards to the YMCA, but I don't think we've heard anything. I think the last thing that we did hear was they were still in talks with the developer, and I don't think very many people seeing much action on that side either. So I wished I could say something, but I don't know anything about that part.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just
Well,
curious.
I think we're going, I'll hold off for a second. I think, Robert Hewitt, do you have something to say?
I just want to say that I think the firm did an excellent job so far. I know they put a lot of time and effort into it. I look forward to the final document, and you all did a fabulous job.
Thank you. Charlie, as it relates to the YMCA, again, we want to give you all time to think about this and kind of wrap your head around it, because we have given a lot of information. If you could, we have not heard from them. If you could find out where they stand, and if they have any of that information, we'd like to understand what their plans are, to see if it may impact the final solution.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I thought, and I'll just say it now, that our next step is we as a park committee need to meet. And as part of that park committee, I was going to ask the YMCA to come, and I was going to ask Robin Antonucci as part of tourism to come as well, to hear and to express their thoughts with this as well. So what I need to know from you, Randy, is the time frame that you want us to get back with you with a decision, and well, I guess we'll have another meeting. So when's the next, how much time you want to give us to have a park committee meeting without you all? And then we'll come up with some ideas, concepts and whatever, and move forward, and then have a second meeting with you before we have a community meeting.
Well, Judge, the committee is our boss, so we'll accommodate your schedule. But if you would like to have things mostly wrapped up before we hit the holiday season, we really need your input back to us in the next week, to give us enough time to be able to put the preliminary design together and get something reasonable back to you all by the 5th.
So can next Friday be not this Friday, but next Friday? We have something to you by next Friday?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll have a meeting next week, and we'll try to get all the entities. We'll get all together and we'll come up with a strategy. So let me ask you again. I think Michael asked you this, but I want to be clear on what you're wanting from us. Do you want to? We're going to take this and we're going. Or do we reshape? Do we say this is a priority, not a priority? What would you like to see from us, so we don't on Friday, we send you something, you say, well, this isn't good enough.
I will go ahead and package up the presentation, this, along with Phil's report, and then I'll kind of do a breakdown of what he said in his program. So basically the primary and breakdown kind of what he said, the secondary and the tertiary, and I'll leave you guys notes. So basically you can kind of say, yes, no, maybe change this. But if you guys can give us as much detail, the program is what's going to dictate the rest of the design. So I'll go ahead and just kind of give a 2-page checklist where you guys can kind of go one by one with these amenities we've broken out and kind of, again.
Okay, are you gonna send that to Charlie?
I'll send that to Charlie that he can share with the rest of you.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you, Phil and Randy, as well?
Yes, I think, Judge, and the rest of the committee, when Shannon gets that to you, basically we need, now that you've seen it and you've got all the document, or you'll have all the documentation, tell us what you agree with, what you like, and what you think, well, this needs to be changed. And then we can have that discussion about what, if there are any items that need to be changed, we can do that. But we really need to understand if there are any items or elements in this that you feel strongly that, even no matter what we heard from, all the public comments or what we're seeing in our data, the regional information that we've looked at and that data, if there's something that you as committee members, being part of that community, feel like this isn't what we want to see, that's what we need to understand.
Okay, there's 2 pieces I thought we paid extra money for. One was a tourism evaluation of what would be enticing for tourism, and 2, a cost analysis or some type of way to come up with monies for this. Okay, so when do we hear those 2 pieces?
Phil, would you like to address that?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So at this point in time, Judge, we need the design in order to know, and basically the design to be signed off on before we can actually calculate that. The more it changes, the more everything else changes. Just like to your point earlier, Randy, about let us know what you like and don't like. When you let us know that, we'll take a look at those things that you may not want incorporated, and how does that impact things moving forward, and those things that you may want incorporated, and how does that impact it, especially from a revenue and operations standpoint. So as soon as we get that design, and while they are working on the design, we'll be working on the operational standards and the operational strategy and waiting for that design so that we can then begin the pro forma. So we're hopefully here within a week or 2, or maybe 3, gonna have what we need to go ahead and jump in and start doing our work. Once we get all of that done and you guys are like, yep, this is the design that we want, at that point in time, we'll be able to start looking at all funding opportunities, as well as what would the economic impact be on the development of the facility and on its annual operations as well to the county as a whole.
What about the tourism side?
Yeah, I think that's good. Thank you, Philip, for that explanation. That's good. Okay, so Squires, and Charlie, and Robert, we will get with the schedule, and we'll have something scheduled as early as we can next week. And we'll just gonna have to, Squires, you're gonna have to give us some time. We're going to have to spend, it's gonna be a pretty long meeting, so we're gonna have to go through a lot of discussion and moving forward. So y'all be ready next week. We'll get with you. Pam will send out several dates or a couple times to look at, and we'll move forward on next week with a goal of getting it back to Shannon on Friday week. Fair
Randy,
enough?
one quick question just to clarify. I think the best question is, what do we expect to get as far as your review, Judge? And I wanted to clarify that the focus is on the program and not the preliminary land use plans that we provided. So what I don't want to, what we're not focusing on is those two last plans we looked at, is those are just very preliminary studies to see what can fit Randy's description of fitting 5 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack, or 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack. You know, that it's a tight site that has a lot of grade changes. But the primary focus and review for this week is really focusing on the program and not really focusing on those preliminary studies. So I just wanted to clarify that for the group in case there was any question.
That is an excellent comment, but that also leads to some concepts that were discussed that I don't know how we deal with hotels on the property or hotels around us by the facility. So how do we deal with that?
Well, Judge, I'm not sure that's anything that needs to be dealt with right now. We've got to find out what size that property needs to be. I'm sorry, the building needs to be within that property. Make sure that everything fits to both Randy and Andy's points. And then we'll be able to take another look at that and see how many additional hotel rooms we believe will be needed to support accommodations for those that do typically stay locally overnight on those types of multi-day events. And so then we'll have a better idea exactly how many rooms are needed, because for you to spend time on that right now, the study for what fits could come back and we could see that, well, you're going to need, 1,700 additional hotel rooms. Well, that's not going to fit on the site. So we want to make sure that we know what size the facility is, how many individuals are going to be utilizing it for each event. The largest event is what we're going to look at to project what you need for additional hotel rooms. And then at that time is probably the most appropriate time to have that conversation.
And Judge, it won't necessarily be that at this point, we're making no recommendations yet, whether it's on-site or off-site. But, as you think about this, when we understand the need for hotels, that's when your economic, whoever is your economic development person, that gives them something to go out into the market and say, hey, we're looking at doing these type of improvements, and based on what our consultants, this study says, it says it'll support this kind of hotel. And it's really a conversation starter from an economic development standpoint to get hoteliers to come to your community.
Okay.
And then it's on them to find a place to build.
Thank you. I didn't want us to get bogged down and not be able to do anything because we got to make this decision and don't know how to make this decision. You understand what I'm saying, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right. So Squires, do you have any other questions?
No
right.
questions, Judge. Again, I just want to thank the Hitchcock Group and their whole team, and I think they've done a great job, and this is an exciting time for Franklin County. So thanks again.
Yep. Ann, do you have any other questions?
No, sir.
Let's go to what you now want to talk about the grant that's out there.
Okay, great. Let me give you a little bit of background information. I think this is an opportunity that fits in well with what everybody is talking about. I'm so happy to hear the acknowledgement of Frankfort and Franklin County wanting to work together on sports tourism. Economic Development Cabinet at the federal level has come up with a competitive grant program for outdoor recreation and tourism, which is very unusual for them. Most of their grant programs have to do with job creation. This one can be tied a little bit more to calculated economic benefits. When I heard the presentation, I reached out to Rebecca Hall at the city and said, what do you think about us working together on a grant application? Because this grant application looks favorably on collaborative efforts at a regional draw or even larger draw. About that same time, I got a call from our Economic Development Authority and tourism. And they had said, have you guys thought about working together with this grant program? And so we all started a conversation about what might work. We talked to Andy Seth, who's a consultant in DC that we've all met at on some of the DC fly-ins to get his take on the program. And also Bertha Parton, who is the regional economic development person for the 8-state region that we're included in. So this grant opportunity, what we thought would fit in well, it fits in well with our plans and also with the city's master plans, and doesn't interfere with any future decisions that need to be made, but gets us along that road of starting some improvements that the community can say, look, we're doing something. They're doing something together. They're looking at a goal that we've talked about. So what we had talked about is improvements to the sports fields, to the ball diamonds in particular. One thing we knew that one of our goals and the city's goals at Capitol View Park is that our ball fields need lighting. So that's an absolutely logical place to start. Ms. Parton suggested that we shoot for not to exceed a $3 million project, which would be $1.5 million for each agency. It would be 1.2 in federal funds and 300,000 in a local match. Although if you do pledge a higher match, you get extra points. They really like capital cities, so that gives us some extra points. And the fact that we would be talking about 10 diamond fields among the 2 different locations, we would rival or exceed any of the complexes that have been listed in some of the comparisons as far as number of fields. It would also give us an opportunity, because we have 2 locations, to really, when we have a very navigable community, that we would be able to embrace our whole community in an economic development push to highlight the other amenities and activities that make Frankfort and Franklin County special and would make it a destination that families could come and enjoy for sports tourism and stay longer to see our the other things that we have to offer, or return trips when they find out what we've got. We just think it would be a great opportunity to get us both started on the road to these goals. So I'd like to get your authority to ask fiscal court if we would like to participate in a joint application. Need to do that quickly, because as Ms. Parton said, if we don't get something in by November 1st, we probably don't have a chance. It's already a long shot. They expect to get 10 times the amount of requests as they have available funding. So, we're willing to put the work in and try very hard to get some funding. We may not get it, but it's a great opportunity to work together and toward this common goal. So that's what I wanted to bring to you guys today, and to get your okay to bring it to court on the 14th to ask for the authorization to get into this application process, and an obligation for the match. And it can be a combination of cash and in kind.
Now, Annie, as we're looking at the master plan, that doesn't affect the master plan. It actually adds lights to the fields.
Exactly. It doesn't affect anything that we've been talking about, because it didn't look like those ball diamond fields would be moving. We know they need lighting, and they need some synthetic turf and some other improvements. So whatever we could accomplish with that grant amount on top of lighting is what we would be looking at doing.
Squire Tracy's got a question.
Thanks, Judge. Thanks, Ann. Hey, quick question. You mentioned that information had gone out, and it sounds like you all have worked on a plan in regards to 10 fields. Can you forward that information to us so we can look at that as well?
Absolutely. It's actually it's a combination of different information sources. Some of it came from, I know you've probably got a copy of the city's master plan. It's their section 7.4 in their master plan. If you don't have a copy, we can be sure that you get one. Pages 120 to 124. For example, just extrapolating from some of that and some other sources, Charlie had mentioned that he believed that we could, with improvements, we could book tournaments from mid-March to mid-November. That's roughly about 32 tournaments. And we're just talking about Lakeview. If you take that number, that's $2.7 million in the local economy, direct spending. That's over 3,700 hotel rooms. So we're talking better than that because we're talking about our 4 fields and Capitol View 6 and being able to market that to larger tournaments. With the other amenities, some of the sports complexes are absolutely wonderful. But one thing that they're missing that we have goals that will make our parks multi-amenities for different family uses, as well as the other amenities we can point out in Frankfort and Franklin County that are close by that visitors will be able to take part in and enjoy. So we really feel like we can market this as a destination and really get sports tourism and Frankfort and Franklin County economic development and
Right.
tourism going.
Right. Oh, and I believe me, I'm right with you. I mean, I'm just glad to see that everyone is jumping on board. I mean, I think we've been preaching sports tourism for several years, and then to really get this park project underway, and it's great to see everyone buying in and getting on board with wanting to get behind sports tourism now. So, hey, it's great. So I
This is
appreciate
a
it.
great way to stick our toe in the water and the community to say we're doing something, and both our city and county are working together. It sets a great stage for continued collaboration.
Again, I don't disagree. Long overdue. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you'd be in favor of her to go ahead and bring that to the fiscal court then, Squire Tracy? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
As I said earlier, I don't mind. I'd like to see what the plan is per se. So
Well,
that's what I'd
Charlie
like
is
to see.
actually working with Sean to get me some estimates because we kind of have an idea what lighting costs are going to look like, and that's going to be the bulk of what we'd be asking for federal funds. But we also have to see what we can do in addition to that, so we can paint a larger picture than just lights. And with our force account and with some cash obligation, what else can we accomplish? So
Right.
Charlie and Sean are working on that information too.
Well, I
Okay,
think the
Charlie,
last
John,
estimate, the last estimate we got on lights, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, was about $1 million.
I think it came in somewhere around 700,000, somewhere
got
between
it.
7 and 8. Just recently, we also have an opportunity while we're waiting to see if we get any funding. KU in the past had offered to partner with us on some projects like this, so we could reach out to KU and also the plant board and see if we can get those prices down a little bit, if they'll work with us on some of these things. So it could be a true community partnership with a lot of different partnering agencies.
Thank you.
Charlie, will you get that information out to the squires before we meet on next week? As soon as you can?
As soon as I can, absolutely, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, nope. All right. Squire Muller, you got anything else?
I'm good, Judge. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great. Miss Annie, thank you for that. And to all of you from the Hitchcock Group, thank you. We've just completed the first step. We've got a couple more steps to go and look forward to this ambitious plan and moving forward to help our community out. So with that being said, thank you. We'll get back with you. Shannon, if you would get that information to Charlie as soon as possible, and we'll keep moving forward. Thank you. Thank you all for being on. God bless. Take care.